Aloha, and welcome back to another session of the Acts Bible Study presented to you by Waiakea Baptist Bible Church in Hilo, Hawaii. I'm Jim Peterson, and I'm your moderator for this Bible study. And today we're covering Lesson 25, where the legal wrangling for Paul continues after he spent a lot of time in prison. So let's get right to it. Beginning in verse 1 of Acts 25. Read along with me if you would. 3 days after arriving in the province, Festus went up from Caesarea to Jerusalem, where the chief priests and the Jewish leaders appeared before him and presented the charges against Paul. They requested Festus, as a favor to them, to have Paul transferred to Jerusalem, for they were preparing an ambush to kill him along the way. Festus answered, Paul is being held at Caesarea, and I myself am going there soon. Let some of your leaders come with me, and if the man has done anything wrong, they can press charges against him there. So, in answer to the first and only question that I have in the study notes is, why did the Jews want to have that Paul transferred to Jerusalem? Well, they had a plan to ambush and kill Paul when he would travel. If he would be moved back to Jerusalem, where all the fun and games began, then they could kill him. But that certainly Festus was just moving in and probably did not want to relocate the hearing. All the facilities there for the governor, all his people, all his assistants were situated right there in the capital of Judea, in Caesarea. All right, let's continue then, reading and read with me in verse 6. After spending 8 or 10 days with them, Festus went down to Caesarea. The next day he convened the court and ordered that Paul be brought before him. When Paul came in, the Jews who had come down from Jerusalem stood around him. They brought many serious charges against him, but they could not prove them. Then Paul made his defense. I've done nothing wrong against the Jewish law, or against the temple, or against Caesar. Festus, wishing to do the Jews a favor, said to Paul, Are you willing to go up to Jerusalem and stand trial before me there on these charges? Paul answered, I am now standing before Caesar's court, where I ought to be tried. I have done nothing wrong to the Jews, as you yourself know very well. If, however, I am guilty of doing anything deserving death, I do not refuse to die. But if the charges brought against me by these Jews are not true, no one has the right to hand me over to them. I appeal to Caesar. After Festus had conferred with his council, he declared, You have appealed to Caesar. To Caesar you will go. So that's an interesting development. Clearly before, the Jews would have liked all of this to take place back in Jerusalem, where they had many faithful traditional Jews and rabble-rousers who were willing to cause even further trouble and put the heat on Festus in his decision-making. So as time goes on, it is going to be held in Caesarea. And so something interesting occurs that is kind of unexpected, but yet very common in those days, as it is today when people meet with Roman leaders. So let's read about King Agrippa, who's a well-known figure and someone who knows the traditional Jewish religion and all the practices very well. Let's read about this beginning in verse 13. A few days later, King Agrippa and Bernice arrived at Caesarea to pay their respects to Festus. Since they were spending many days there, Festus discussed Paul's case with the king. He said, "There is a man here whom Felix left as a prisoner. When I went to Jerusalem, the chief priests and the elders of the Jews brought charges against him and asked that he be condemned. I told them it is not the Roman custom to hand over anyone before they have faced their accusers and have had an opportunity to defend themselves against the charges. When they came here with me, I did not delay the case, but convened the court the next day and ordered the man to be brought in. And when his accusers got up to speak, they did not charge him with any of the crimes I had expected. Instead, they had some points of dispute with him about their own religion and about a dead man named Jesus who Paul claimed was alive. I was at a loss how to investigate such matters, so I asked if Paul would be willing to go to Jerusalem and stand trial there on these charges. But when Paul made his appeal to be held over for the emperor's decision, I ordered him held until I could send him to Caesar. Then Agrippa said to Festus, "I would like to hear this man myself." He replied, meaning Governor Festus, "Tomorrow you will hear him." Kind of an interesting moment. King and Agrippa and Bernice are making a courtesy call, and that's not uncommon for courtesy calls to be made by other public officials and private people from the private sector. They want to get to know them. They want to get to see perhaps what their opinion is on certain issues or opportunities that they may have in mind to talk to the governor about. So, but while he's there and they're having a nice conversation, Governor Festus kind of opens up and talks about maybe one of the first things that he was dealing with, and that was this case with Paul. So let's read on now as we continue on in Acts chapter 25, beginning in verse 23 through 27, and we'll kind of read what happens here. The next day, Agrippa and Bernice came with great pomp and entered the audience room with the high-ranking military officers and the prominent men of the city. At the command of Festus, Paul was brought in. Festus said, "King Agrippa and all who are present with us, you see this man. The whole Jewish community has petitioned me about him in Jerusalem and here in Caesarea, shouting that he ought not to live any longer. I found he had done nothing deserving of death, but because he made his appeal to the emperor, I decided to send him to Rome. But I have nothing definite to write to His Majesty about him. Therefore I have brought him before all of you, and especially before you, King Agrippa, so that as a result of this investigation, I may have something to write, for I think it's unreasonable to send a prisoner on to Rome without specifying the charges against him." And that was the customary at that time. If there was going to be an appeal to the court, from the commentaries that I read, it was very common for the governor or whoever is judging a person accused of a crime, that would be there would be a letter sent along explaining what the charges were, and the only exception is if they were known to have killed someone, and it was a known crime that occurred, and that in that sense the appeal to the emperor might not be granted. So we'll have to continue reading on through Acts 26 to find out what happens in the next legal proceeding. And so this story gets increasingly interesting here And so I pray that you'll continue on and persevere through your study of the book of Acts. I pray that God will continue to touch you and that you might hear his instructions and be courageous and take on applying his instructions to your life. Until we meet again, I look forward to seeing you next week. May God bless you and keep you. Amen.